Great. Thank you all so much for coming and for joining us this evening. And in particular, I want to say thank you to Kareem Weaver. He's obviously the protagonist of the Right to Read documentary, and he made the trip out here to Ohio for tonight's screening. So let's give him a round of applause. Next to him is Brett Tingley. She is the founder and president of Parents for Reading Justice. And last, but certainly not least, is the governor of the great state of Ohio, Mike DeWine. And I'm Anna Staver. I'm the host of All Sides here at WOSU. So let's get into some questions. And the first one is for you, Governor, and it deals with the state budget. So a lot of the things that you asked for in regards to the science of reading were in the last state budget, and they're now being implemented in schools across the state. As you look forward, what are you going to want to see in next year's state budget when it comes to the science of reading?
Well, I think frankly, the most important thing is that we get implemented what was in this budget. And, you know, Fran and I, after the budget passed, and just to go back a little bit, you know, we asked the legislature to do things that had never been done before. This is a state that is as you all know, a local government state, and it's also a local school state. And so what we asked them to do really is to say that every school in the state of Ohio, every classroom would use the science of reading as basically the underpinning of any curriculum, and that all the teachers would be taught how to teach in regard to the science of reading. And they passed it. You know, this was a very, very big change. And again, it was something that in that respect overruled what any local school would do. After that, Fran and I kind of went on the road, so to speak. I think we visited over 20 schools. And what we wanted to see was, we went to schools that had already started the science of reading. Some had done it 5 years ago, switched over. Some 4 years, some 6 months ago. And after we did 2 or 3, what we'd do is we'd go in and we'd watch the classes and how it was taught. And then we'd go sit in the library with 4, 5, 6, 7 teachers. And what they told us in each school was almost identical. After we'd heard it 2 or 3 times, it was just the same every time. And that was, the teachers would say, I wasn't taught this way. I've been teaching for 5 years, 10 years, whatever the case, one that was 15 years. And we were doing everything that we could. I was working as hard as I could, but we just couldn't change things. We were still not getting a lot of the students who were able to read. And it was just very frustrating. We changed over. School made a decision to change over to the science of reading. Some teachers said, look, I was reluctant to do it. I was skeptical. But then they all said, as soon as we changed over, even before we started doing tests, we could tell there was a difference. And these teachers, if my wife Fran was here, the way she described it is they were almost remorseful that they had not done this before. It wasn't their fault, but they felt bad about it, but they felt so good about what was going on. And so that's what we have seen. We know this works. We know that all the data shows it works. We also know from talking to teachers who have taught one way and then taught another way, they know that this works. The challenge that we face, though, is making sure that this is occurring in every single classroom in the state. And we know that there are schools out there now who tell us, look, we're following the science of reading, but we also know anecdotally that in some of the classrooms they're not doing it. One classroom may be doing it, and the other classroom may not be doing it. And so, other places that have done this have told us it takes 5 years to 6 years to make this changeover. We can't wait 5 or 6 years. I mean, we've got kids who are growing up, and if you miss a kid, that kid's not in the right classroom, or that kid, we're not making the change fast enough, that child may never learn to read the way the child would be able to. So that's really what our focus is right now. Next budget, we're going to continue this. And if schools, frankly, need additional assistance to make that change over, I'm going to ask the legislature for the money to do it. But the main thing now is, I think, getting the schools to do this.
Yeah, I'll say as somebody who follows state budgets line by line, when I saw the literacy, and it'll say increased year over year, and the literacy investment was an 1,000% increase. And I remember I called your budget people and I was like, is that a mistake? 1,000% increase? That feels like it's a mistake. Brett, so for those who don't know who Brett is, her daughter really struggled to read in the Upper Arlington School District. And there is this really heartbreaking documentary, not to give you guys homework, but there is this 2020 documentary called Our Dyslexic Children. And it really chronicles her fight to change how reading is taught in Upper Arlington. So I'm hoping you can give advice to parents out there who maybe have struggling readers or are maybe looking to convince their own district to their own teachers to get on board.
Absolutely. We started this about 10 years ago. We realized early on, we had a dyslexic daughter. And one thing that dyslexic parents share in this is that if their children don't get structured literacy, they don't learn to read. So we also realized we didn't have an organization powerful like the NAACP, and so we had to form our own powerful group, and that was with parents in our district. So we formed a parent group, we organized ourselves professionally, and reached out to the district, and we're actually able to flip them. And this was the first district that reading recovery was taught in. So it was a Herculean effort, I say. But we have also found that in order to implement, even with this great legislation in place on the budget, there is still a role for parents to play an ongoing role, standing shoulder to shoulder with the district, because if you want to know if the science of reading is being implemented, it's our children in the classrooms. It's our families who are suffering when they don't learn to read. So we would like to partner with you to make sure it's implemented.
That's great. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We really need that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think some of it is just knowing the lingo, right? So if your kid's kindergarten teacher or first grade teacher starts talking about leveled readers, you got to know that that means whole language. That means Fontes and Pinnell. When you get those student, those teacher, parent-teacher conferences, that's what I was looking for. When you go to those parent-teacher conferences, you have to know what the different things are, and that's a totally different paradigm than to just be like, oh, my kid's on level M, that sounds great. So, Kareem, I'm gonna ask you this question. So we are here in Columbus, and we are not too far from Ohio State University's campus. You guys know what I'm asking. So reading recovery, which is whole language, it's a kind of whole language. It was created in Ohio State. One of the professors, Gesu Pinnell, is a big proponent of it. How big of a deal is it, in your opinion, that Ohio is making the switch to science of reading?
Well, it's not necessarily my opinion, but this is folks across the country that I talk to. We work with universities, with FULCRUM, the nonprofit I run, and also at the NAACP. We've talked with universities. The Ohio State University is a flagship institution because of the connections to some of these methods. You mentioned reading recovery, you mentioned FNP or Fontes and Pinnell. It's very important, and it's not just a matter of what the university does. It's what's done under its name or under its shield and banner. You may know that Columbia used to be the house, I don't know what you call it, but the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project was underneath the banner of Columbia. You guys know that, right? Some of you may know this. And they very respectfully and savvily said, we're no longer going to be the holder of this. They're going to do it on their own, but we're going to do it a different way. They didn't say much more than that. I'm sure they had lots of conversations about how to say it, but they did what they had to do. And I think Ohio State, who has a lot of good things going, it's not just about what you do, it's what's done in your name. And you have to be careful where you lend your shield and your brand, because that gives credence and credibility to some things that may not be in students' best interest. So I think it's very, very important, and we just have to name that.
So, Governor DeWine, we've all watched the documentary now, and it's difficult to watch, and all those numbers that pop up as we move through districts across the country, and how many people or how many children are below proficiency. Do you think, this is a difficult question, but I think it's important to ask, do you think Ohio in some way has failed a generation of children?
Well, I can just tell you, I wish we had done this right after I became governor. I wish we'd done it sooner. But we're doing it now, and we're going to do it, and we're going to make it work.
Annie, can I just add a little bit to that? Just a tiny little bit.
Sure.
This is a very, very important thing. And I'm glad he was concise, and both because I think that's the best way to be, and because it gives me a little time to jump in. This is the toughest part of it too, but this is one of the toughest parts of this, is the regret. We're human beings. If I'm a teacher, okay, and I went to graduate school, I paid my money, right? I got my certification, and I went, and I'm doing the best I can. Understand? I love kids. I want to make this thing go, but my training was one way, the school district is another way, the curriculum is another way, and now I'm hearing about this new thing, and stuff comes and goes all the time. It's tough to make sense of it all, and everybody's pointing a finger at you. I'm just saying, you got to sit with that. So one of the biggest things we have to do, yes, we have to be accountable, and we have to allow for grace. It's not that we deserve it, but all stakeholders have something to do with this. Grace says, okay, we're going to let that go anyhow. We're going to move forward because we love our kids. And we just have to offer that to ourselves and to each other. There's no easy, you'll go crazy. It will crush you if you start thinking about the kids and their lives and what's happening, the impact, and if I'd have known, and if I'd have done this and all the rest. And we understand that. There is a level of grief that has to happen at the universities, the faculties, listen, I'm Dr. So-and-so, this is on the wall. I taught methods classes. I did this, and under my name, we did this, and now they're off doing it, and now you're telling me it's wrong? Yes. Or it's not that it's wrong for everybody. It can work, but we're talking about what works for the greatest number of kids. Or if I'm a teacher and I espouse certain methods, or a principal, or what have you, or a parent who, when they told you something's wrong with your kid, you just wore down and eventually you said, well, I have 3 that are doing fine and 1 that's not. I guess 3 out of 4 is not bad. There's enough pain and grief and regret to go around for everybody. But at some point in time, we have to say enough is enough. We're going to get up. We're going to move forward. You can't stay stuck there. So I just want to name that for us. We have to have grace for each other.
I agree. I want to add one quick thing, though. But as parents of children who struggle to read, there is a great deal of urgency because our children's mental health, their lives depend on it. So I give grace. I will say, though, there's one stakeholder that I don't cut a lot of slack, and that is the colleges of education, because the one entity that should be keeping up with the science is the College of Education. We actually partner with teachers. We come together with teachers because our children didn't learn to read because they were never taught how to teach children how to read. So our teachers in Upper Arlington, we come together with them, we take care of them, we're strong supporters of them. But my patience runs thin with universities who, this is life and death for our children.
Just to add one practical part of this, and how important what our universities do as they are teaching our future teachers. Again, when we would go around and talk to these schools, they made it very, very, very plain how important it was that new teachers that are coming into their school be taught based on the science of reading, that the colleges switch over. And look, I'm a former county prosecuting attorney, so I use some kind of terminology like, but the jury is returned. We have a verdict in regard to this battle over how to teach. There's really no more debate. We know this is the right way to go. We know this is the right thing to do. So it's tough sometimes, particularly at the university level, for them to change. But it's just imperative. And we have some schools. We met, for example, at Marietta College. They have switched over and did that some time ago. Akron has done it. There's a number of schools that have done it. It's just very, very important for our elementary schools, our schools that are out there, our K through 12 schools, that their new teachers coming in, they don't have to retrain them. If they have to retrain new teachers coming in every single time, this is going to go on forever. Yeah, right. And so it's just important. So as you put on the list of things that we have to do, making sure our universities make that switch. We also put that in the budget bill, and we said they have to switch over. And so we're now talking to them and, praying with them or whatever. But it's important. It's important to these schools. And the thing I've told some of the colleges is, look, if you don't make the change, the market will take care of it eventually. Because these schools at some point will not take your graduates anymore.
Yes. That's right.
But it's going to take a while. It's better if you just switch over and then we can move on.
So that leads me to my next question, Governor DeWine. So we're in a transition period right now. A lot of this year was focused on getting teachers up to speed and, transitioning in, buying new materials and getting ready for this. I guess, what is success going to look like to you when it comes to the science of reading? What metrics are you going to use, and when should we start to see those impacts?
Well, I think success is where every classroom in the state, that every child is being taught based upon what we know works and what works the best, and that is the science of reading. And as I said earlier, the challenge is going to be that schools can say this is our policy, but unless all their teachers have been taught how to do this, and that's why we put money in the budget to compensate teachers for that training. We also put money in the budget for new curriculum. But again, I like to look at things when we're talking about public policy and we're talking about kids. I try to look at it if that was my child or that was my grandchild in that classroom, and I knew they were not using the best way to teach reading, and maybe my grandchild is struggling, that's not acceptable. So I think we have to look at all of these kids. We need to look at them as our kids. And when we look at them as our kids, what we will do is pretty darn clear what we're going to do. There has to be this sense of urgency. And again, get back to what you said. I think parents have to be empowered, and they have to be empowered. Part of what we're doing is we're traveling around the state. We're in Toledo today. We're in Youngstown yesterday. We were in Cleveland. We're here. Part of it is to get the word out to parents as well, because parents need to understand this. And it's not something that people intuitively understand. We use terms like the science of reading. Who knows what that is? I mean, the average person, so part of it, I think, is empowering parents, to be able to ask those questions to the schools and to be able to also be supportive of the schools when the schools are making an effort to try to make that switch over.
So, Kareem, much of the general public is just starting to discover the literacy crisis and the science of reading. I think the pandemic really crystallized this issue that's been bubbling under the surface for years. Can you talk to us about some actionable steps that folks in the audience can take and what we can do when we leave here tonight?
Okay.
No pressure.
None at all. Just got to be honest. Actionable steps. And I'm going to go, let's just say this. Okay, so some concrete things. When you go up to the school, you ask them for a skill-based scope and sequence. That means, what are you going to teach? What are they going to learn? And by when? Now, it doesn't mean that every day they're going to be right on that thing, but it gives you a roadmap for where they're headed. If they don't have something like that, if they can't tell you, that's a red flag. You have to make sure. So, let me step back. So the young teacher in that movie, Sabrina Causey, she didn't have tenure. And so she was teaching something different than what, now those of you are there any educators in here? Are you teachers? Okay. So you know how fragile of a situation that is. You're not following the script, but the script was terrible. And the kids weren't learning. What are you supposed to do? And so she was nervous having those cameras around because she didn't want anybody to find out what she was doing. She was literally running an underground railroad for kids. I didn't know that was a joke. I'm serious. I'm sick with a heart attack. She was saving kids' lives on the under. We found out in the NAACP meeting, hey, there's something going on at Markham. I heard it. We had to literally tiptoe in and find. And so I had to talk with the superintendent and talk with folks like, listen, I understand this and that and the other. I understand the protocol and you got the superintendent, the chief academic officer, the network superintendent, the this, then her. Y'all need to leave her alone. She's teaching these kids to read. She's using something I know you don't, maybe you should look into what she's doing. Okay, but so you have to be very clear on your priorities, and you have to be willing to stand up for those who stand up for your kids. You can't leave a teacher, a principal, a superintendent, a school board, a governor, a commissioner, whatever the role is. Listen, I don't personally, yes, we all have our politics, fine, go ahead on. Democrat, Republican, Independent, fine. But it's my hope and my prayer that this is elevated on your agenda enough that if anybody is going to stand up for your kids, you'll stand up for them. If not, I have other questions for you. Real talk. And so you have to make this a priority and let it be known that this is a priority. That's why the NAACP is an important organization for a lot of different reasons, but this is a civil rights issue. This isn't just about who's right and who's wrong and Democrat and Republican and conservative. Oh man, we ain't got time for that. Our kids are circling the drain because they're not getting what they need consistently. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Marva Collins, who was, so we call it the science of reading now, but this is what Marva Collins was doing. That's what this is. It's just now repackaged. Fine, call it what you want to, but do what Marva was doing because evidence shows that it works. But so as parents, you got to ask for that skill-based scope and sequence, and you got to be willing to stand up for people that stand up for your kids. Now, that might mean sometimes people might not like you too much. And because that means now you're not just baking cookies. Now you're not just driving to the field trip. Now you got questions. And I'm sure you know, for parents reading justice, sometimes you don't get invited to certain things. So your friend groups begin to change. When I taught for a long time and I was a principal so everybody know, I know all them people. Now We still love each other and respect each other, but it's like, uh-oh, here you come. Yeah, it's kids first. It's kids first. It's kids first. And you got to stand on that. You got to stand on that. You cannot lead scared. You can't. Not everybody's going to like what you're saying and what you're doing, but if it's kids first, they'll at least respect it.
But I would like to add that it is difficult to do something like this on your own. But we have found at the district level, at the state level, that if you join together as a parent group, it's much easier to ask these difficult questions and to take care of teachers who are doing the right thing and to be relentless until every child is taught to read.
Right. I'm going to flip this. I'm going to take a little bit. I done flown all the way out here. You got to give me a little bit of privilege. Look, you know the hardest part of this work is going to be? We adults can't get along. That's the hardest part of it. Between the conservative and the liberal and the black and the white and who this, that, and all this. Look, suburb and urban, all this, we just don't play well in the sandbox together. I'm just going to be honest with you. And let me tell you something. When you go up to the school board or you advocate or something, that's fine, you come in, but it's different when you come together. The question is, do we love our children more than we dislike each other? That's the question. And I cannot answer that for you. That's a gut check question. And I'm not saying you got to get along. You don't have to like each other. For our coalition, I can't stand half them people. No, for real. But as long as you can keep the main, man, I'm serious. Listen, as long as you can keep the main thing, we good. Now, we can argue tomorrow. Once we get this silent, once we get the babies reading, listen, on site, we're going to argue. Cool. But today, it's our kids first. That's the attitude you have to have. And that means that we're elevating their needs ahead of whatever our interests are. For universities, that's tough because it's, you're a world unto yourself. Nobody really questions universities. K-12 system, that's tough. Nonprofits, that's tough. Everybody's got to give a little bit, not just the grace, but also saying, I'm willing to work for people I may not prefer or choose to work with in most situations. But because this is backed by the evidence, the NAACP didn't just jump out and say, oh, this sounds good. No, they don't roll like that. Believe me, it's just something that has proven to work for our kids. All our kids, you mentioned. That's why. So that's the toughest part of this. And that's an adult thing. But my hope and prayer is that we love our kids enough to keep the main thing the main thing.
One of the latest trends in this literacy universe is that parents of children with dyslexia and social justice groups like the NAACP are working together to form an even stronger coalition and to even get more done. Kareem and I are going to partner on reaching out to some districts for this from opportunity as a joint venture. And I think that's bringing even more people into the fold with that one laser focus.
We're getting close to the end of our time together, but I did want to ask about bringing other kids into the fold, particularly those who aren't in kindergarten yet. So about 80% of children who enter elementary schools in the Olentangy district, just north of us, test as kindergarten ready. The inverse is true for some of the elementary schools here in Columbus. So, Governor, what role does the state have in raising those readiness numbers, making sure our littlest readers are ready?
Yeah. We have to do more. State's not doing enough in this area. We have to make this available to all children. Many times there's a real economic level, and parents simply cannot provide that. They can't pay for it. In this last speech I gave last week, where we talked about the state of the state, we allocated a significant amount of money to our centers to expand, have more. We also have raised it so that more parents are eligible. We'll be back next year with the budget, the regular budget, with the General Assembly, and we're going to ask for an increase in that. Look, it's not all about money, but it is about getting it so parents can afford. And I learned by going out and going from schools. One of the things when I would talk to principals and I talked to teachers and I talked to kindergarten teachers, one of the things they would tell me is they could tell the kids who had been in some preschool. They could just tell them. And, they told me that, many of these kids are not ready. We also are seeing, as you know, and we can argue about the reasons, but we're seeing more. They're telling me no matter whether I'm in a rural area or urban or suburban, we're seeing more acting out at kindergarten level, things they've never seen before. So part of it is getting these kids in earlier, and we're gonna push this as much as we can in our budget next year.
And before we wrap up, Brett, I did want to ask you about something that has changed, specifically when it comes to screening for dyslexia and any kind of challenge that a kid might have. We now have universal screening here in the state of Ohio, so every kindergarten through third grader is getting checked. And then if you are a parent who has concerns, you can now demand check at any time, correct?
Yes. So that is a huge win. And we helped to pass the legislation and the budget, and we will support you in this endeavor 100%, because this is very important.
Yeah, and one of the things I didn't know, which I find really fascinating, is it's a spectrum. So if you get flagged for further testing, it doesn't mean your child has dyslexia. It just means, hey, there's a couple of things we want to check, so don't freak out, is essentially important. But I sat through some of those committee meetings. Man, were they controversial. And I was so surprised that it was such a fight and such a debate, and there was so much controversy just around screening for reading issues. How do you weather that? Because it took a couple of years, right?
Well, I think it's all a matter of education. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but if the root of the problem, if colleges of education were keeping up with the science.
Those colleges.
I know. I could be out retired doing whatever retired people do, but this is what I do now. And so we've got to make sure that if they were teaching the science, then the teachers would know how to teach reading. Districts would save all kinds of money not having to untrain and retrain teachers. Kids would learn to read. Ohio would prosper. We would have no trouble competing with China.
She's putting a lot on you.
World peace. Yeah. World peace.
You're absolutely right. This does have something to do with economic development. It has something to do. We're creating jobs in Ohio, and the question businesses ask us when we're trying to get them to come to Ohio, the final question, the hurdle you always have to get over, is for them to be convinced that they can find the educated workforce that they need. So it all comes together. And let me mention one other thing. I talked about it last week. Kids cannot read if they can't see. And you talked about screening in school. The law in Ohio says there has to be screening, eye screening, but it doesn't say anything else. So what happens, and we've looked at this, and over half of the kids who are red flagged that they need to have actually a real eye exam beyond the screening, over half of them never get that eye exam. And we have got to do better than that. We put some money in what we announced several weeks ago, particularly focused on our Appalachian counties to get more opportunity to have the eye test and then to get the glasses. But it's not just a problem in Appalachia. this occurs all over the state, that we have kids who are not getting that. And again, that's something that we have to commit to do.
So final question is for you, Kareem. So the state of Ohio is being sued for excluding reading recovery and other whole language programs from its curriculum. I'm not going to ask this of Governor DeWine because he can't comment on pending legislation, so you get it. Unless you want to, then you totally can. So what do you make of this ongoing legislation and this lawsuit to essentially say, hey, you can't exclude us from the classroom?
You can't exclude us.
What can you say publicly about it?
Well, I don't mind. I can say, I'm a free black man. I can say what I want to say. People don't have a right to our kids. They're our kids. It's a privilege and an honor to contribute to their education. And the minute you forget that, you really shouldn't even be around. You got to understand. You got to understand. That's why parent advocacy is so important. You have to understand it's our kids above everything else. If what you're doing is working, it'll make the case for itself. That's really the question. Does it work? If it works, we good. And not just today, but the longitudinal data should show that it works. That's really what it is. Everything else is just noise. Does it work or not? If it doesn't work longitudinally, consistently over time for all of our kids, then what are we doing? Unless you put a sticker on the box that says works in this situation for this group of kids, in this context, on this day, at this time, in this, but that's not how they usually pitch those type of things. Since that was the last question, I gotta say one other thing. Y'all, if you're here, you saw the movie, Larry, in the movie, the little boy Larry. People always ask me what happened to Larry. Something about Larry. First of all, Larry called me the other day. Larry's almost 40 now. Yeah, it happens. You get old. Yeah. He's hanging in there. He moved before the end of the year. He used to come over to the house all the time, him and his cousin. I adopted his cousin. But Larry, they had to leave town. They had some situations going on. And so he told me the other day, Mr. Weaver, the one thing I regret is that I didn't stay in your classroom and finish learning how to read. But here's the reason why I bring this up. But he's hanging in there. People look at that and they say, oh, that poor boy. What happened to Larry? Let me tell you something. Larry was in the gifted and talented program. Yeah, that part. Larry was the kid that when we went into the cafeteria, the kids are marching in line. Larry would be in the trash can, digging out, he'd have the carton and some lemons and some straws. He'd have rockets shooting across the floor. He probably had dyslexia. That's why at MIT, they call dyslexia the MIT disease. So sometimes we think about the science of reading through our own lens. We say, oh, that's dumbing it down. I'm telling you, come on now. That's dumbing it down. That's for those kids. Yeah, okay. We are turning our back on our best and our brightest because we refuse to give them what we need because we don't perceive it. Because we learn to read like some of the 30% of the public learn to read, which is with a broad range of instruction. But over 65% need it the way Larry needs it. It's not that we're doing them some, that's the majority. The question is, will we serve all of the state's children or just those who are privileged enough to either have an economic floor to get private tutoring or who learned it the way 30% read, meaning no matter what you do, you're gonna get to read. As long as you don't teach something, we're gonna learn to read. So that just has to be said. We have to check our own bias and privileges. That's the majority. They may not have dyslexia, but they might have dysteachia. Right? And no shade at teachers. I'm a lifelong teacher. I love teachers. You can't tell me, look, it's no shade at you have to you can't expect teachers to make bricks without straw. You have to give them the materials, the leadership, the training, the support at the university level and in service once you get the job. The curriculum's got to be right, aligned to the research and census, and you need a contract that has preparation time so you can fully implement the thing that you guys got in the first place. Then we can start talking about other things. Okay, I just had to get that off my chest. Now I can get on the plane and go home. Sorry.
Great. Can we get a final round of applause for Kareem, for Brett, and for Governor Mike DeWine?